Back in about 18 years ago, we lived in Qatar. My wife had an educational contract over there. We were living in a city called Doha. And Doha is a big, bustling, busy city. They're tearing it down and building it up all at the same time. It was a massive, busy place. And I'm a country boy. As you know, I came from out the back of Taranaki. And every so often, I just had to get out of town. And Qatar is not the most scenic country in the world. The desert over there is kind of dusty, rubbly desert. The beaches aren't anything to write home about. But I heard of one place in Qatar, on the border of Qatar and Saudi Arabia, called the Inland Sea, Khor El Udeid. And it's a place where beautiful, pristine sand dunes meet a massive inlet, the Inland Sea. And it was absolutely beautiful. And I've seen photos of it like this one here. The problem was the road ended here, and it was a 40-minute drive across salt pans and desert to get to Khor El Udeid, the Inland Sea. And I didn't know anyone that knew the route to get there. I felt like I was stuck. I did know some friends with some pretty rough four-wheel drive. There was a Nissan X-Trail, there was an old Courier Ute, someone had a Pajero Sport. And it was a problem. I really wanted to see this place in the flesh. And one day I was searching on Google Earth, Google Maps, and I zoomed in far enough and I could see the tracks in the sand that led from the road end to the Inland Sea. And if I followed them back, I could map a route that didn't go through any of the locals' camps. They've got little camps in the desert. That didn't go over any of the high sand dunes, that seemed to lead safely across the subcar, the salt pans. So the next day I went out and I got the cheapest GPS that money could buy, a little Garmin E-Trex. And I sat there and I took some coordinates, put some waypoints in, and I entered every one of them into that Garmin E-Trex to make a route. And of course, if you know GPS coordinates, each of them are about 9 digits long, and I had to scroll through 0 up till 9 for every one of those that I had to enter. And that button was really hard to push. It was like trying to push into Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's bicep. I had a bruised thumb by the time I got all of those coordinates in. But I had a route from the road end into the Inland Sea. I talked to some friends and we assembled 3 vehicles to go out there the very next weekend. We drove out to the road end, and on the way out there we passed a sign. If you can read that sign, it says, "Return safely, your children are waiting for you." Which was a worry. It was particularly a worry because our daughter wasn't waiting for us. She was sitting in the back of the car as well. We got out to the road end and we deflated our tyres, which you've got to do. It increases your surface area. It gives you some traction out in the desert. We weren't sure how far to deflate our tyres, but we let some air out. And we started up, we lined up, and I could set my GPS. Ken was a Canadian that was driving. And I said, "Right, that line straight up this first low dune." And he says, "Okay." And he gunned it, and up this dune we went. The wheels were skidding. We went up, up, up and over. Our friends followed us one after the other. And we came to the subcar, big open salt pans. And the danger is there that the water gets too close to the surface and you can break through those salt pans and sink. But so many vehicles had been across there, you could physically see the black marks across the subcar. So we tore off across the subcar. We went through one subcar, over some low dunes in a gully, across to the next subcar, over some low dunes and onto the next one. As we were driving along, we hit some soft sand, and I glanced across, and my wife was driving an X-Trail beside us, and I could see her slow, slow, slow. I was going, "Go, go, go, go," and she sunk up to her axles in the sand. We turned around and went back to her. And we had a tow rope, we had some shovels, so I started trying to dig her vehicle out with a spade. And we put some things under her wheels, this bit of matting that we had, and we tried to move forward and we were getting nowhere. And we did have a bit of an old tow rope, but luckily there was a serious looking off-roader coming the other way. And a local man got out and he looked at us for a minute and he shook his head. He backed his vehicle up and he pulled out a snatch strap, hooked it on the back of his, shackled it onto hers. He basically said nothing, But he looked at us and he said, when I go, you go. So she jumped in the car and he signalled and he took off in his vehicle and the snack strap stretched. My wife gunned it and pop, up it popped out and went onto the hard sand. And he disconnected and then he looked at us again and he shook his head. And he said, whatever you do, follow the tracks. Follow the tracks. It's okay. He took off, went the other way, and we followed up. And I followed my GPS line that I'd made, and we could see where the tracks went up over a low dune. And by this stage, we were a long way from the road end. There wasn't too much traffic out there. And I thought, well, what could possibly go wrong? That's one of the things that could have gone wrong. And that's another one. But I said, okay, Ken, we're going to do it. So we gunned up a low dune, up and over. We hit a bowl, went through that bowl with the wheels churning up, popped up over another one, and we've made it to Qatar El Udeid, the inland sea, and we camped out there. And I'm using this as an example for trailblazing leadership because it wasn't about me. The fact that I was able to get there and make our way through to the inland sea wasn't because of me, it was because of the tracks that someone had left before me. And it was an adventure because there weren't guardrails. It wasn't a 4-lane highway leading straight out to the inland sea. All that we had to go on were tracks in the sand. What was left before us to guide us without hemming us in. And I think that's the job that we have as leaders, is to create those tracks in the sand. To create guidelines that give people the opportunity to be themselves, to have their own adventure, but also to give them something to aim towards. That, to me, is trailblazing leadership. And that's what I'm going to talk about today.